finally get to talk to you almost, well, not quite person to person, but, to kind of back and forth.
Would you like to start by introducing yourself and what's your relationship with the old woman?
Hello, my name is Christina, and if you are on Tumblr, you probably know my blog, Joe and Friedrich. It was started because I just love them so much and did not think that they got the recognition they deserved. And I've been a fan of Little Women for the longest time. Like, first time I read it was like between, I'm gonna say, the ages of 10 to 12. That was like somewhere around the ages that I started to read it. So been a fan ever since.
That's amazing.
It was the great illustrated copy of it. So like it was sort of the abridged version, and then managed to, over the years, finally get a hold of a copy that was an unabridged version. So it was sort of a journey to get to where I'm at right now of like almost full-blown obsession.
I think one of the reasons why I actually started my podcast was because of your blog. Because when I was younger and I was obsessed with Little Women, I was in Live Journal, and then there were like Amy and Laurie group and Joe and Friedrich group that I was lurking there. They slowly vanished.
Aww.
I think your blog was really the only place where I could find people who were interested from the canon. Everywhere else, it was just about the films or very strange views about Little Women that I did not agree. I am very grateful for your blog, and I think many others are too.
Aww, that's so great to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt just like you. It was like either most of the people that were around me didn't know or care about Little Women, and those that did were just kind of knew only like you said, the movie version. And many of them are great. I don't know if we'll ever get to it, but we can, I have many thoughts of the most recent. But most of the times, the film version seems to sort of put more focus on Joe and Laurie. And I was like, no, like, to me, I don't know, it felt, and this is because, again, I remember when reading the books, I was like, it almost felt a little incestuous to me because I always identified with Joe, and I have a brother, and so much of Joe and Laurie's relationship while they were like growing up felt very much how like me and my brother would interact, just this very goofy, ridiculous antics that to the point where I would probably be doing like some of the more quote unquote boy stuff. So when people were like, oh, Joe and Laurie, I'm like, ew, no, I can't. Like, not at all. That for me was just like, that's just too weird. I can't even fathom the thought of Joe and Laurie at all.
Yeah, that is very true. And then there's this quote from Louisa May Alcott where she writes that she wrote Laurie to be the brother that she never had.
Yeah, it's very shocking that most people don't pick up on that, really, how incredibly brother and sister their relationship is like. And I know that some people are like, oh, I love the idea of childhood friends to lovers, but it's like, not them. Not them at all.
Yeah, I think with Laurie, there are a lot of things that people just ignore about this character. And we've talked about this before, like the catfishing and the proposal and him threatening that he's going to hurt himself. And all these very disturbing red flags are there, but then they're not in the films, and most people don't know about them.
Yeah, it's amazing just how the media will change your perception of what a story is. Because I remember, I don't know if you maybe had seen it, but someone, I think it was their own post or someone replied to a post I did, and they're like, after watching the 2019 movie, I was like, maybe I'll go read the book. And they were not just surprised, but full-blown shock to see that there was not even a hint of Joe and Laurie. And they were like, in a way, disappointed and like kind of really like upset that Gerwig would do that when like the book never did. So it's amazing. So yeah, it's amazing how like how media / movies and whatnot will change how we perceive how the story should be, because that's not how it went at all.
Somebody commented quite recently that Gerwig cared more about her actors than the book itself, and I think that could be true. I think it's also a problem in the 1994 film and maybe the 1949 film. So she just continued this long tradition of romanticizing Laurie. There's no excuses for that.
No, not at all. And this is not like, I think in general Laurie is a good character, but it takes him a while to get to be a great character. But they all got flaws, but he just seems to be the one that really is like stand out, and to the point of like, okay, that's very problematic, dude. During this day and age, if you did at least one of those things that Laurie did, a girl would be like, just dump him, girl. Don't even bother, But yeah, like I said, they don't put focus on that, and I think it's a shame, because when he does propose to Jo, and I do have a little thing I want to mention about that. I'll get to that in a moment. When they portray his like heartbreak, it's like, oh, poor Laurie, but it's like, no, it's not really poor Laurie, because you've had so many signs leading up to Jo being like, I can't or I won't, because you clearly didn't get the hints before. And I've seen some people that have said, Jo was so mean to him during the proposal. And it's like, not for nothing, but wouldn't you be too, if after all those years, him trying to like, flirt with you and like kind of try to kiss you and whatever else, and you're just like, in the nicest way, no. And then you just being so fed up with it. Like, I don't blame her at all.
Well, in the book, the reason why Jo goes to New York is because Laurie was harassing her.
Yeah. And that was what I was going to say, is that I hate when the movies do the proposal before New York, because it seems like she's just trying to like walk away from like heartbreak, or like, oh, I can't watch poor Laurie be sad. And it's like, no, she left before proposal happens, because she wants to get away from him, so that way he can be like, all right, just take time, try to, maybe after some time away, you can figure out that you don't really care for me as much as you think you do. And that's why when she comes back, she's just like, you know what, I'm done. Yeah, I don't like it when the movies kind of switch it, because I feel like it does it almost in a way to be more sympathetic to Laurie rather than sympathetic to Jo.
Was that the same in the 2017 series?
I think that's probably the only version that I can think of that actually did it the right way.
Yeah. He proposed to her after she came back from New York. Yeah. I still think he was very romanticized in that version as well.
And it's so important that it happens after New York, because, again, it's one of those moments where it's sort of like you sort of have an inkling that maybe she has a lot more feelings for him than you think she does. But the other version that actually does it correctly is the BBC version, the 1971. Because in both of those versions, they both say like, oh, don't tell me you fell for that old man. And it's like, that's such an important moment, because it's Jo standing up for Friedrich and saying like, don't talk about him like that. And like getting that sort of like first inkling that maybe she has a lot more feelings for Friedrich than you would think she does. And standing up to Laurie, who has been her friend for many years, and pretty much saying, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. He is as dear a friend to me as you are. Like, I think it's very important in showing the development of Jo and Friedrich's relationship, is that one little moment where she sort of is like ready to just tear Laurie apart, because how dare he say something poorly about her Friedrich.
Yeah, and if he's her friend, he should respect her. But there are a lot of indications that he doesn't. Like before Jo goes to New York, there's that time when he's low-key trying to flirt with her, and she clearly says no. And then before that, a couple of years before that, when Beth gets sick for the first time, I think he's trying to kiss her, and then she says no. And she's 16. And when she goes to New York, then she just starts to develop these feelings for Friedrich. So it's just this natural way of things that she would reject him. I think one of the things that most people miss in Little Women, even some people who read the novel too, is that it also happens to Laurie that when he's with Amy, he sort of starts to become more independent, which is not the way his and Joe's relationship works, because he was looking her to be his nanny or somebody who taught him what to do. But then with Amy, he sort of becomes more independent and also wants to find something else to do his life than just, writing these operas for Joe or music. He wants to be productive. So it's all thanks to Amy, or she pushes him to finding purpose that he was lacking.
Yeah, and I think that too, he's sort of seen Joe as almost a safety net, that no matter what could happen, good or bad, he can go to Joe and she'll be like, it's all right, Laurie, it's fine, everything's going to be okay. But with Amy, she says like, well, you got to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. It's not that I can't be there to almost comfort you or to be like, oh, that's all right, Laurie, but I'm not going to be your safety net. If you're going to fall, try to help yourself up in a way. But yeah, I think that's what it was. He's just gotten so used to falling back to Joe that he doesn't realize that he could do stuff on his own, and Amy allows him to do that.
Yeah, and it's really a boy's proposal, because he says he gave up billiard and smoking and what else. So that's not a really good reason to marry.
Right. Yeah, that, and let's do it because everyone expects it. Like, okay, but what about, you're pretty much listing almost every reason except the fact that we love each other, and I'm clearly sitting here telling you I don't love you that way. Like, he's trying to pressure her and like, don't disappoint us, Joe. Like, don't, grandfather wants it, your family wants it, and it's like, what about what I want, Laurie? Like, I don't want this. At that moment is his most selfish moment, because it's, I want what I want, and how dare you not want the same.
Yeah, and I was so disturbed when I read Gerg's interview, and she said that how could Joe reject the handsome young Laurie?
I could go on forever. I bother my friends sometime when Little Women comes up and I'm like, the Gerwig version, because there are so many things. I have no idea what her goal was with that, because it felt very much all over the place. And like you said earlier, it felt more catered to the actors. And it's such a shame, because I had, before obviously seeing Little Women, I watched Lady Bird, and I thought Lady Bird was great. And when it said that, Saoirse Ronan is going to be Joe and Timothée Chalamet will be Laurie, I was like, oh, that's great, because it feels like they have a good chemistry. But, I think that they'll work it out. And then I'm like, when watching it, I was like, that's not, you totally missed. The point is here, and you went way over Gerwig, and I'm very disappointed. I was expecting better from you.
Yeah, one of my friends read the Joe and Laurie book. You heard of it?
Oh yeah, that's right, I do.
She said that it was like Gerg's version in that sense. It felt very disrespectful to the original material and for the author. I'm not going to read it because it makes me angry.
Yeah, no, I couldn't stand it. I don't know if I could even do it as just a tell us what you think. I'd be like, I can already tell you what I think. I'm just not going to bother, because it would have been a very, I almost want to say like abusive relationship, because they both are such hot-headed people. And while Joe at that point in the proposal has learned to sort of manage it, I feel like that if she was married to Laurie, he would sort of bring that old habit back, and it would just been incredibly destructive and just not in any way good at all. It would have ended, I mean, back then they really couldn't divorce as easily as we could today, but I think it would have been miserable by their first anniversary.
You know about Louisa and Laddie Wisniewski, the real life Laurie? Because they had a short time together, and Louisa liked his sense of humor and his company, and then they continued writing letters when she went back to US. But then later on, she wrote to her journal that he was boring. And then one of my friends wrote that, well, if Joe and Laurie would have gotten married, Joe would have thought he was boring.
Yeah, because, and two, I think she would quickly realize just how childish he is, because at that point she has already kind of understood, like, she's sort of grown up, not in the sense of like being like forgetting like who she was in the past, but like grown into the person that she should be and sort of understanding herself better. But, and I almost feel like that Laurie almost sees it as a kind of betrayal, like, how dare you grow up? I want to be Peter Pan forever and let nothing happen. And it's like, well, this is how it is. And Joe did have that earlier when Meg got married, but I think she was able to learn it, to take it gracefully and to sort of realize like things change, but it's okay. And here's the best way to go about it, to stay true to myself, but also be more accepting of the change. Whereas Laurie, I think, sort of saw Joe as his last hold on to the past and let nothing move forward. Whereas Amy is more of that symbol of, here is what the future can lie ahead. You know, let's not think on who I was as a child, but who I can become tomorrow. And I think that if Joe was to have married Laurie, he would have been stuck in that sort of perpetual childish stage, and she would be the one to grow up and, like you said, be mother to him, and it would have been a totally imbalanced relationship. Whereas with Amy, he would learn to grow, and they could grow physically and mentally together old. I think that they don't kind of really show that as well as I think that they should have in adaptations.
Yeah, I agree. And Louisa May Alcott, she has this quote about character development, that the character grows when she moves on from another interest to another. Well, that happens to Joe with Fredrik, and it happens to Laurie with Amy, which is really interesting. Mm-hmm. But I think, Laurie's ideas of romance, they're very unrealistic.
Nobody is the same person they were 5 years ago. In some form or another, you change. Who I was in high school is not the same person I was now. And I sit back and think, like, thank God, because I don't think I was the greatest person then, but that doesn't mean that, one, that I'm a horrible person, that I can't learn and grow from it. When you think about like Laurie, like, yes, he did, it was very not so great things, but he can learn and grow from it. But when people say that, like, oh, Alcott ruined Joe's character and made her into something different, it's like, didn't you pay attention? Joe is still Joe. She just learned how to understand herself better. And this is what I think people don't get, is that Joe wasn't trying to be a boy and to be a boy, or that she repelled a lot of the social norms because she hated all of them. It was because she felt constrained by it, or that she was always told things like marriage is only for the benefit of getting money or property, and it's either do that or be a spinster. And she's like, well, I guess I'll be a spinster for that, because I will not be that person, rather than being told, like, you could marry for love. And, no doubt for someone like her, if we're going to kind of think of also how Alcott herself was, I was bullied a lot when I was in middle school, which is like probably your most formative years, from transitioning from childhood to teenage years. I had always had that feeling that nobody's ever going to look at me and love me. And I think that in a way, Joe must have felt the same, because throughout the novel, at some point or another, whether it's in the nicest way possible, if you could say, or very harshly, Joe has been told, like, nobody's going to want you if you don't behave, or, you're too tall and you're too gingly for this. And, Joe, if you don't curb your language, you're never going to find a husband. Like, so no doubt that for all those times that she's ever been made to feel that who she was as a person is totally unworthy to be married, that she was like, you know what, then I guess I just won't get married, because it's better to accept that than to hope for it and nothing happen. And that's kind of what makes, I think, pushes a little bit more of why I love Joe and Friedrich so much, is because he never made her feel bad for who she was. Never. Despite what some of the versions will try to tell you, that like him being like, oh, how dare you write for the Daily Volcano. That never happened in the book.
Never.
But he never made her feel inferior, which is something that Laurie had done, in whether he meant to or not, had done to Joe. Because no doubt somewhere in the back of her mind, she was like, I know people are expecting us because he's wealthy and we need money, or he will throw like sort of like his privilege around, and she'll kind of somewhere in the back of her head be like, yeah, I don't have that privilege as both a woman and someone with no money. But Friedrich always encouraged her. He listened to her and she listened to him, and they grew from it. And I think that was like for the first time she felt like maybe there isn't something totally unlovable in me, that if someone can look at me and go, you are fine as you are, that there maybe still be hope. And the fact that these two sort of little quote unquote oddballs of their society can find love and happiness is not only so sweet, but it's so like inspiring. You know, it almost makes you feel like, you know what, maybe someone could love me for all my oddities and imperfections.
That's very true. And I think a lot of people just don't get that, because Joe and Frick tend to be very romanticized in the films as well. And I told you about this recently, that my sister watched the 1978 version, and she liked that because Joe and Friedrich seemed so normal. They were not overly romanticized. They were hardworking, and you could see that they had this similar interest throughout the series. And my sister hasn't read Little Woman. She has seen the 1994 film and this 1978 series.
Yeah, that, and you can see the respect between the two of them. That's the biggest thing I feel with Joe and Friedrich, is that even if it's not like this poetic, romanticized version, that you can immediately tell there is an enormous amount of respect for each other. And that is, I think, the biggest thing for a relationship, is respecting one another and knowing that you're both on equal playing fields.
Somebody commented on my Instagram that there are a lot of people who say that they are like Joe, but then they're actually not at all like the book Joe, because the book Joe, you know, there are some boyish things that she likes, but then she also likes to be a mother, and she loves all the boys. She wants to start a school for boys. And then she also likes to knit and make clothes, and she likes to read romance novels, and she cries when she reads them. She adores her niece and her nephew, and she loves Friedrich's nephews. She has some very feminine qualities.
When you say that, it reminded me, I made it like a while ago, like quite a while ago, but it sticks with me. I said something like, if Joe was present in the modern day, and this is again because I was very cringeworthy, but I was also this girl too. It was like that like era, like the 2008 to 2012 or so time, and where the girls were just like, I'm not like other girls. Like, and they made it seem like that, you know, if you like the color pink, or you like this, you like makeup, and you like this, wearing dresses, it was almost like a negative quality. And I think Joe would have been that type of girl. Like in the beginning of the novel, she would have been that I'm not like other girls girl. And what makes her relatable, at least to me, is like throughout the book, she kind of realizes like there's nothing really wrong with liking those things. That's why I say like she learned to understand herself better, that like I can have some of the more stereotypical boyish qualities, but still like the girly things. But someone, it sticks with me forever. They replied saying, "You're an idiot," and then they proceeded to block me.
Oh no.
Like they didn't block me just long enough for me to see it. And then I was like, wait, let me check that again. And then I found out they blocked me. And I was not saying it as like to say like, oh, Joe is a terrible person. Like, no, I'm saying that she's a flawed person, and that's how her character grows. She goes from being like, I don't care, girls are stupid, boys don't have any drama, to being like, you know what, there is nice things about being a girl, and there's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, it's amazing how some people just don't, they say that they love Joe or know Joe and then say stuff like that. I believe, I don't know if maybe you had seen it, but someone had like, favorite literary character of the day, Joe March, and said something like, oh, but then they gave up their independence to marry that old professor. And I'm like, first of all, you don't know the book. If you knew the book, you would have seen how that went down. And I don't think you really care about the character as much to say, like, to make that claim of Joe gave up her independence and she's not that great of a character because she did that in marrying a man that loved and support her. And honestly, I think as quote unquote unromantic as they are, they had probably one of the most romantic proposal scenes I've ever seen in book or in movie. Yeah, it's amazing how some people just, they think they have an idea of the character. And I almost sometimes think, that's so Laurie of you. You have this perceived image of what Joe is and what you want Joe to be, when the truth is Joe is not like that, but you just want her to be that way. And it happens to be most of the time the Joe and Laurie shippers that have that sort of delusional idea of who Joe is supposed to be.
I think the whole idea of not being like the other girls, it comes from very deep misogyny, actually. This idea that you are better than fellow women, it's a form of misogyny. And it was a trend some time ago, hopefully not so much these days. I think one of the problems with Jo, especially when she was younger, was that she identified so much with the masculine that she became very misogynistic. And you can really see that when she sort of makes fun of Meg wanted to go to a ball, or Amy, trying to impress her female friends. But then she grows out of that. And I think part of that actually has to do with her and Laurie's friendship sort of not fading, but she's growing out of it. Laurie has some great qualities, but he does sort of embodies this sort of 19th century typical young man, the way they behaved. Jo got some really bad influences from him, and he from her as well. And then I think she kind of tries to block her emotions sometimes, because she feels that if she shows her emotions, then people are going to see her weaker, and when people see her weaker, she's more feminine to them. She also grows out of that as well.
And that's why I think it's so even more moving to see her character development, because she goes from being someone who is so closed off and this is not tears, I just got something in my eyes type of person, to kind of being more open to take advice from people, more open to criticism, and more open to wanting to grow, because I think it's very much a stifling thing when you are told, like, just hold it in because, it's going to be seen as weak. And as someone that, in some ways, I was a very sensitive person, but I was always told that in a very negative light. So I was like, all right, you know what? I will just try to hold it in, and that was not healthy at all. And it was so almost in a way seen as kind of like, a very feminine thing, like, oh, she's just an emotional little thing, the poor thing. And it's like, in some cases I was right. Like, what they said was very rude or mean, but boys will be boys, and you're just being too emotional over it. having Joe kind of learn how to sort of be more open and accepting, and to have a positive influence like her mom and Friedrich, that just to name the few, to just sort of be like, it's okay, like there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable. It doesn't mean that you're weak, it just means that you're open to having other people help you. And sometimes that's the hardest thing, is to admit to saying that I need help, or this is bothering me, or I don't know what to do. Because if you just are that person that's like, yeah, sure, I know what you're doing, I know, yeah, I totally know that, and you don't, that can cause a lot more problems. And for me, it was, I had to sort of unlearn how to unlearn that behavior, because it didn't help me in the slightest. So now I've kind of lived by the motto of, if I don't know it, I'll ask for help. I'd rather admit that I'm being an quote unquote idiot rather than make myself look even more of an idiot than pretending I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I think it is a very long process for Joe to unlearn those habits. Real man. There's Nat's character. She kind of calls him girly, and she sees him a bit weaker than the other boys because he's so sensitive. And she has this similar relationship with Laurie. Mm-hmm. It's not that Friedrich is not sensitive. I guess he's not as sensitive as Laurie is. How would I put it? He's a lot more grounded, and Laurie is very idealistic.
I guess if I had to sort of think of it, it's like Laurie was who I was when I was in school, where I just took everything and made it full blown, whereas now I'm a little bit more like Friedrich, where it's like, that hurts, but let's try to just sort of see what's the best way to respond to that very sensitive moment.
It's a much more mature response. Mm-hmm. You try not to take everything too emotionally or too personally. Laurie does that, and I think to some extent Joe was like that as well when she was younger. Okay, one of the things I wanted to ask about you, because we have this goal that we want a German actor to play Professor Bear at some point. I have read quite many stories from German readers and people who are German descendants who love Friedrich's character. And because he represents such a wonderful a German character. And I'm not German. I did study a bit of German in school. But I've been doing this research on Louisa May Alcott's obsession with Germany. And it's every single page. How do you feel about that? Why Hollywood doesn't hire great German actors?
Yeah, I know. I don't know if it was like almost at first like inaccessibility. I mean, it sort of started in its making of like the late 1910s, early 1920s. Talkies were very new in the 30s. I don't know if this is like very true, but this is like what I can imagine, is that maybe at first when they were doing it, they didn't have a lot of German actors. I mean, they could barely get regular actors. They were pulling them from like the stage and trying to teach them how to perform on camera. But I almost want to think that they probably didn't get German actresses because during that time there was the rise in Nazis, and they're like, And I feel like that sort of stereotype has gone forward, because for anyone that does not know, I am of a German descent. My grandmother on my dad's side came over from Germany, and she was in her early 20s or so when she came over. The story was that and this was, I think, just proof that not every German is horrible. Like, every time someone associates Germany, they go Nazis, and it's like, no, but they lived in East Berlin, and comparatively, East Berlin was worse than, West Berlin. Like, people were trying to get into West Berlin. And she and her family had to be smuggled into West Berlin because her father, who would be my great-grandfather, was the postmaster general, and he was smuggling like information between the Nazis and the Russians to the Allies. And they were like, well, okay, well, we got to get you to the West to protect you. like my whole life, and it's very difficult. Like I'm German on my dad's side, among a few other things, and on my mom's side, it's Italian Armenian. I feel like whenever you ask someone, like if you say like, oh, I'm Italian, like people kind of are more like, oh, so you wanted a meatball and the pasta. Like they do a little bit more of like funny like stereotyping. It's like, oh yeah, haha, and you talk with your hands, and it's like, yeah, like, but like as soon as you say like, oh, I'm like part German, they go like, were your family like Nazi? Like they just immediately go to like Nazis or like someone bad. And most of the time, I feel like when you see Germans portrayed in media, they are Nazis or the villain slash a sort of cold, unapproachable person, or I will try to say it the nicest way possible, but like weird fetish person that may be borderline illegal, like that kind of weirdo. And it's like, why all the time that? So it really was rough to find characters I felt were very pro-German, that were just so nice or normal or just gave a positive image to Germany. And I was like, really the only person I can think of is Friedrich. Like he is a very genuinely good person. He is smart. He is respectful. And it's such a shame because the things that I've read about Germany, I'm like, wow, like you guys are great. Like there's a movie that Germany did that is like from like, I want to say like the 1910s with Conrad Veidt, that is way before anyone's time, being pro-gay, like pro-LGBT. Like that's incredible. And that he also did another movie where it was like pro-abortion. It's a woman's choice if she wants to have a kid or not, and there's nothing psychologically wrong with that. I'm like, that is incredibly progressive. Unfortunately, the country has been so overshadowed by what the Nazis have done. And it's like, not every German person was a Nazi, and not everyone agreed with it. So over the years, I felt a little bit more protective of my German side because I feel like I lean towards being more German traded. But yeah, Friedrich for me was, first of all, he's like almost like my dream man. Like I want someone like him. And if it turns out that he's German, like why not? And it just bothers me that now that we have a lot more accessibility to actors from all around the world, why there isn't more German actors playing the part. And in some cases, I'd have allowed to sort of be forgiven, like William Shatner and I'm forgetting his name, Stanley. No, the BBC version one.
Mark Stanley.
Yes. Like I can forgive those because even though they are like American / British, they are still putting like a German accent. We're not totally forgetting that the character is meant to be German. Whereas the Gerwig version, you have a French man playing a German character with a very German name. It's not even like you try to change it to sort of be like, all right, we'll try to fit his nationality a little bit more. But like, I'm hearing a French accent saying that he's Friedrich Bär. Very German name. It's so confusing. And yeah, like it just boggles my mind that like, on one hand, her statement of being like, and this can go into a whole can of worms of when she's like, well, why not give Joe a handsome man to fall for? And because I'm tired of seeing these attractive girls fall for these not so attractive guys. And it's like, on one hand, you're right in some cases, but like, that's not the point here. Because one, again, you didn't read the book. Joe is not supposed to be conventionally attractive, and neither is Friedrich.
She's not giving me a good enough reason not to hire a German actor. Yeah.
Right. And if you could see me, my hands are just moving all over the place in frustration. But like, how am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
How in the hell do you sit there and go, I need to find an attractive German actor. They don't exist. But Daniel Brühl is right there. He's been right there for so many years. How do you not see him? I can't believe it. And there are other great German actors. He's like the first one that comes to mind. Like, how? That is the thing that boggles me the most. As someone pointed out, they're like, well, as much as I do want him to be Friedrich, and knowing how the Gerwig story comes out, I would not have wanted him in that one. Yeah. And I think that's fair, because that would have been a total disservice to him and the character.
We need a long series with Daniel Brühl as Professor Bear. Movie with sequels.
Yeah, I'll take whether it's time period canon or like modern day, like, because I am just one of those people that I like to sort of daydream and just sort of like, what would I do if I was ever given the chance to make my own version? I have it like all planned out, and he would definitely be one of its actors. And in my version, it would be like a mini series and set in the modern day, but like pretty much the section with him, it would be just all like Joe and Friedrich. It would be like practically nothing else. I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame that, you know, in general, Hollywood doesn't do much with foreign actors, because there's so many wonderful foreign actors and so underutilizing them, I feel. You know, I get it. Some people would be like, well, what would a German be doing in America at this time? Or like, how could you make me believe this? And I'm like, well, that's the magic of movies. You can suspend your disbelief for a little bit, or the writers can be a little bit smarter and make it work. But yeah, it's such a shame. And some movies I sit there, I'm like, oh, this actor's going to be in it. Like, I remember them from this movie. And it's like, oh, they're only in it for like 5 minutes. That's a shame. They sit there and say like, America is supposed to be like the land of everybody, that immigrants can come over, and it's like seems very fully just Americans. Like, why can't there be a German living in New York City? What's wrong with that? Like, I know quite a few British actors are living in like LA, like Ben Barnes and Dan Stevens. Like, they've made a home in America, and a few other actors in other places. It would work. It would make sense. It's not totally crazy. I had gotten into The Alienist with Daniel Brühl, obviously, and it makes sense. Like, you know, if someone was like, well, how could they be born in America but still have an accent? Well, his character is raised in a home where it was his parents are German Hungarian, and he was raised with being taught German. And if that was pretty much what you spoke for most of the time, you would grow to have that sort of accent. So I think there are ways to utilize foreign actors in American media. I just don't think that they're smart enough how to use it outside of German, Nazi, Italian, mafia. Like, let's be a little bit smarter and better about that, you know?
Yeah, there are so many stereotypes about different European nationalities that are so outdated and old-fashioned. It's really a shame. Like, if I think about Finnish character in a Hollywood film, they just hire us to be Vikings. The time that I lived in Germany many years ago, I do remember thinking that Germans are very family-oriented and very welcoming. And I always connected that Friedrich's character, Louisa May Alcott. She traveled in Germany, and she was a full-heart Germanophile. This really horrified her because she loved Germany.
Yeah.
And you get stuff like Emily in Paris, where you're not honoring French culture, you're making fun of it. It's so disrespectful. I hope that somebody out there is going to listen our rants, and we are getting more sophisticated versions of Little Women, hopefully with Daniel Brühl or other great German actors.
I think between him and Amy, they are the most poorly interpretive characters in media, because I feel like that they're the most hated. All the time I see people say like, oh, how could Amy do that? That was so awful, like thinking of the burning of the manuscript. And it's like, well, for one thing, and again, I blame this on most of the media, you have like a 20-something-year-old actress playing the part of what should be like a 12-year-old. So it comes across more mean-spirited, especially with the Gerwig version, like when she's like very calmly just like, well, what was I supposed to do? I didn't have anything else that would have made you upset. And it's like, I'm sorry, but that's too sophisticated of an answer for a 12-year-old to say. And again, coming from the mouth of a 20-something-year-old, I can't believe it. Yeah, it's just it's poorly interpreted. Again, when you have versions that try to be more Joe and Laurie oriented, and yet add Friedrich in, they almost feel like, well, they're trying to just make it, he's stealing Joe away, or Amy stole Laurie away. I don't think most people know that the book, when it was first published, came out in 2 separate parts. there wasn't going to be a second part, but it was supposed to end when Meg gets married. But people always seem like, oh, well, they made her have Joe be married. They made the publishers made her do it.
Which is actually not true.
Right. Some fans may have written to Alcott saying, like, can't Joe marry Laurie? But there was no pressure to get Joe in general married. And I love that Alcott was like, I will not marry Joe to Laurie to please anybody. And it's like, yeah, you go, girl. And they act like as if Friedrich was a last minute addition. Right. Like, again, I think because people don't know its publishing history, that they think, oh, it was just one book. And then the publishers were like, well, you need to have Joe marry off someone. And she was like, all right, I guess this guy. Like, no. And again, I feel like it's a disservice to Alcott to say that she just threw Joe with this guy. And it's like, no, she didn't just throw Joe to this guy. Like, it's not like he appeared in the last 10 pages. It's like, oh yeah, in love and married. Like, no, she develops a good and full-on relationship between these two characters, and it grows to become love, and which is how the novel ends. But yeah, it's amazing like how people just kind of hear that. And again, I think it's because they see something on the internet that someone writes an article that says, oh, what a shame that Joe couldn't be the independent writer like Alcott originally wanted. And it's like, that's not the full picture, and people just kind of latch on to that. You got to kind of dig a little deeper, or at least have someone that is willing to go a little bit deeper, such as you and myself, that will put it out there for everyone to be like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, now that makes sense. When people say stuff like that, I'm like, you really don't seem to have not only respect for the characters, but not for its author either.
I actually think it has a lot to do with what you said earlier about Joe's loneliness, or that she feels that she's going to be weaker when she wants romance or love or family for herself. She's afraid that it's going to make her look weaker in the eyes of others. This actually mentioned in Little Woman. Under the umbrella chapter, the narrator says that Joe was afraid that she's going to lose her reputation if she reveals to the world that she is like the other girls, that she wants to have a family and marriage, and she wants to fall in love. But I've studied Louisa's life. She was incredibly lonely, especially after Henry died. And then she had this fling with Larry Wisniewski, who was one of the real-life Lauries. That didn't turn out very well. But then she could not tell that to the public because she was afraid people were going to see her weaker. She was always really annoyed when people pitied her because she was a spinster. That has a lot to do with the way the story in Little Woman goes, because she wrote Joe's and Friedrich's relationship to be a wish fulfillment. And I always say this in this podcast because I think that's very true. When you read her diaries, and she writes how lonely she is and how she envies her sister's marriages. Mm-hmm. And I think it actually was quite nasty for Louisa to say that her publisher forced her to marry Joe, because Louisa and her publisher, Thomas Niles, were very good friends, and he never asked her to marry her characters. And he didn't give her instructions about the characters. So it was actually Louisa trying to protect her own reputation.
And I do definitely agree with you in that idea of a wish fulfillment. And, they always say, like, it's better to be alone rather to be with someone and feel lonely. Mm. So I can see why she would be like, don't pity me because I'm a spinster. I'd rather be alone than be with someone that would make me feel lonely. But yeah, like you said, it's a wish fulfillment. And I think it takes a whole other level of understanding Joe and Friedrich's relationship when you know that. Not until hearing and seeing your work did I kind of realize, like, oh, there was like a real life Friedrich, and like, oh my goodness, there is, an age gap that is the same as Alcott and Thoreau and Joe and Friedrich. And so much of the description of Friedrich is based off of Thoreau. Like, I never knew those things, but like now that like I know, I'm like, wow, that it really is, like you said, like it was her way of being with someone that she wants to be with. And I think for most writers, I personally feel this way. Like some of the things I write, I'm just like, I wish I could do those things, or I wish I could meet someone like that or be that type of person. So it's really not surprising when I hear that for someone like Alcott, who has sort of been told by people that she is not conventionally attractive,
It's really wild because her fans actually said that to her face, that, oh, you're not as pretty as Joe.
And if you truly believe that she is 100% the Arthur avatar, it's like, well, that's supposed to be the same. But it's funny that, like, back then people said that Alcott is not attractive, and I will look at her picture and I'm like, oh, I think she was very attractive. And I think people don't understand that when they think of things. Like, I think it was in a podcast you said, like, when talking about the actress that plays Joe in the modern day version of the 2018 one, they're like, she's not very pretty to be with Friedrich. And it's like, well, one, I think that actress is attractive, but also, like, you're missing the point.
They said the same to Katharine Hepburn, that she was too boyish,
and
Joe-ish boyish.
Right. Like, I think people don't fully understand that. And it's also dependent on the time period, because someone made parallels to Joe and Lizzie Bennett. You know, they always say that Lizzie's not attractive. Like, I remember when I got my mom to watch the Colin Firth version of Pride and Prejudice, and we were listening how, like, you know, people were saying, like, Mrs. Bennett is like, oh, Jane is the prettiest of my daughters. And my mom was like, I think Lizzie's quite pretty. I'm like, yeah, but you got to remember that back then, the typical norm of what is pretty is to be fair-skinned, fair-haired, blue eyes, fair on the lighter tone of things, rather than the sort of darker hair, darker eyed, or even darker skinned. I think that people don't kind of understand what we would think is attractive now was not attractive back then, regardless whether they really are not attractive or not. But it's amazing how some fans will be like, they're too pretty to play this part, and then others will be like, well, they're not pretty enough for this. And it's like, can't the point of the story be that it's meant to be these two people who have a good chemistry together make it work? Because one of my teachers when I was in college, I want to say it was Cleopatra and Antony that she had seen the play. It was something of that kind. And she was like, I couldn't believe it because the actors were not attractive at all. And I was like, does that matter? Like, that was probably one of those moments where, like, I was slowly realizing I was demisexual. I was like, what does that matter when it's, like, should be what the chemistry between two people are? But yeah, it's amazing how people are so focused on what is physically attractive that somehow equals to romantic attraction versus being like how two people connect that leads to a romantic attraction.
Yeah, well, that's the Laurie fans. Oh, well, many of them. That's not really a reason to be with somebody. So you just want to hook up. But
right.
Joe doesn't want to hook up with him.
And in my post, it was the one I made years ago of why Joe shouldn't be with Laurie, I made a mention of, like, how almost hypocritical it is that people say these things about Joe and Friedrich, but there's a lot of parallels between the situations, not fully, but, like, when you look on it on the outside of Jane Eyre and Mr. Rochester, like, people make comments of the age gap is not right, or they're not attractive. How could they fall in love? But it's like, well, there's an age gap between Jane and Mr. Rochester, and in the novel, neither one of them are seen to be conventionally attractive. Many of those same people will go, oh, I love Jane and Rochester. They were so romantic. And it's like, pot, meet kettle. You know, it's amazing how people pick and choose what they want to like and what they won't like.
When I was doing the research on Henry David Thoreau, and I came to this part where it was mentioned that Henry didn't like traditional women, or that he kind of had resentment for overly feminine women, I was like, damn, Louisa would have been perfect for him.
Right.
And, I mean, there is the speculation that they had an affair, and I don't know if that's true, but he would have been perfect for him, at least in that sense, because, you know, she wasn't traditional, and she kind of also rejected some parts of femininity. Research on Henry and Louise, and I was so happy when I find out all the real life Friedrichs and the real life Lauries, because it made me feel so validated. Because Little Woman made a lot more sense when I found out about it, especially the story about Laddie, because, you know, I think one of the reasons why Louisa liked to hang out with him was because it's almost like she always wanted to have somebody there that she could take care of. Was it then her sister, or when she worked in the war as a nurse? And then there was Laddie, and she took care of him because he had tuberculosis. You can see that Louisa always had this very maternal side, that she liked to take care of people. Story about Laddie. I think one of the reasons why Louisa liked to hang out with him, it's almost like she always wanted to have somebody there that she could take care of. Was it then her sister, or when she worked in the war as a nurse? And then there was Laddie, and she took care of him because he had tuberculosis. You can see that Louisa always had this very maternal side, that she liked to take care of people and her parents later on. And then Joe is very much the same. And we just recently talked about this with some fans on Discord, that in the 1994 film you can see this maternal side of Joe. And then in the 1949 film, and I like that when people add that dimension of her to the films, because it's a big part of her that she is this maternal character. People always complain that, Friedrich is so paternal, fatherly figure. Well, Jo is very maternal in the book. Of course, she would like to be with somebody who is fatherly character and loves children as much as Jo does.
Yeah. and it's surprising that people would think that. I remember someone said, even if a person doesn't like kids, see how they react to them, because it tells you so much of their character. And even if someone who doesn't like kids is still good with kids, that says a lot. But if you're someone that is like, get away from me, kids, like that's not a good judge of character. That's not a good sign. So it's surprising that someone would say, oh, this character likes being with kids, or is a father figure to almost any child that he sees. That's a horrible thing. It's like, why? Like, it shows that they have a really good heart. And, if you were that type of person, it's like, I'm looking for someone to settle down with and to start life with a family. And seeing how they are with other children tells you a lot. And these two also, I think, get axed a lot. I think only in the Masterpiece Theater 2017 one. Franz and Emil get so cut from the story, and I feel that it tells a lot of who Friedrich is, because the fact that he takes in his nephews and treats them as if they are his own, not just like, I'm their uncle and these are my nephews and I take care of them. Like, no, he treats them almost as if they are his own, is so telling of how his character is, and the way that he treats Tina, the sweet little girl. Like, he just is like, oh, come to me, come to your old bear. Treats her as if she's his own. Is what impresses, I think, Joe a lot, is just how good he is with kids. And I think, like you said, that it touches that sort of maternal part of her who loves being with kids, loves to take care of people, as we have seen with Beth. Beth is pretty much, I feel almost like she was, if she could, she would have been like her surrogate mom. It kind of reminds me, their relationship, of that one scene in Mermaids with Winona Ryder and Christina Ricci, where she says, when you came home from the hospital, I tried to get you to call me mom. I feel like that would have been very much Joe and Beth's relationship. You gotta hate kids that much to be like, I can't be with someone that is friendly to children. What's wrong with you?
One of the things that I liked about Frick, when he comes to court Joe, how he spends time with her niece and nephew. Then there's that scene with the chocolate. I always thought that was so sweet. In Joe's Boys, I think that's really one of the best ones, when you can see how Friedrich and Joe reacts with their sons and their teenagers. And then there's that scene where the other one gets bitten by the dog, and then they go to tell their parents, and then they are really nervous to tell them, and they're just like, we love you, and they comfort them. So sweet. I just love Rob and Ted, and I would like to see that story to be adapted a lot more often. In Little Man, it's also mentioned how Franz almost became like Joe's son. He saw her more as a mother figure. They were very close. So Franz was Friedrich's oldest nephew. I mean, it tells a lot about a character, that he comes to this new country to take care of his sister, and then adopts her two sons when she dies. It tells everything about Fredrik's character, how great he is. When Jo is in New York and she writes that letter to Mommy, it's all about Fredrik. I think that story about the way he lost his sister and adopted boys, it was something that really moved Jo. It's something that she was very attracted to. One of the many things about him. It would be nice to see that in the films. One of my favorite scenes in the 1994 film is the part where Fredrik is playing with the children. And I like that also in the 2017 series.
And another moment, and it just kind of hit me, and I have my copy of my book right next to me just to double check. But in some of the other movies, they sort of switch it to be an adult. But in the 2017 film and in the book, the first time Jo sees Professor Bear is when a little servant girl is carrying this bucket of coal, and he takes it from her, like says, the little back is too young to have such heaviness. Like, it doesn't matter whether or not they are a child that is a boarder or a servant. Like, he's a friend to all children. And like, that is like such a sweet little moment. And some of the other versions, like the Katharine Hepburn one and the June Allison, they make it that they're an adult carrying like a load of laundry or something like that. But again, it's one of those telling moments that he sees that this little girl who is a servant, and like I mean, we can talk about like child laws, labor laws as much as we want. Someone who is supposed to be working, and he sees that they're struggling, and it's like, no, little one, that's not supposed to be what you're supposed to do. Like, no. Even though other people would have been like, that's her job. So what if she's 10? She's supposed to carry that bucket of coal. Like, he is just like, but she's 10. She shouldn't be carrying a bucket of... Again, that's a very telling, just like how, not only how good he is with children, but just the fact that he recognizes that I don't care if it's your job. Like, you as a person should not be carrying that. That's not supposed to be your job. An adult should be really doing your job, honestly. But as far as I can recall, the Masterpiece Theater one, the 2017 adaptation, was faithful to the book in that regard.
Yeah, it was a really nice scene, and I really wish they would have developed Fritz a lot more in that series, because they were doing a really good job with that little time that they had, except the part of him shouting at her about the writing. Other than that, it was pretty decent.
Yeah.
It was written by Jo and Laurie Shipper. There it goes.
Yeah, I think the closest we get to the proper approach of the sort of Daily Volcano is, and it's weird for me to say it even though I know that this is supposed to be a sort of remake of the earlier version, but really I think the June Allison one does it best, because it comes across more of, instead of Friedrich being disappointed, he's more questioning, like, I'm surprised because you don't seem to be the type of person to write those kinds of characters, and Jo admitting, like, I know they're not the greatest, but they help get money in, and I've been having a hard time with publishing what it is that I want to publish, and it becoming more of a discussion of, you are a good writer, I know you are, but stick with what makes you feel good about writing, rather than trying to kowtow to what these people want. And I wish that, again, if I had my version, I would make that a very clear distinction of the difference that Friedrich has of sensationalism versus Jo writing for it, because like he knows that she is writing it, but for the sake of money, and he's like, I totally get where you're coming from, because I know that you are doing it in the same way as I would for money. But most versions will play it like, oh, I thought you were better than that, and this makes me think a little less of you, or whatever, and like Jo taking it as like a hard blow. But like, she seeks out his advice in writing, and he gives it. It's not the Daily Volcano stuff that she hands him, because she's not proud of that work, really. But in general, her regular writing, he likes, and he gives constructive criticism, but he's never mean to her about it. He's more upset of what the Daily Volcano represents. Sort of almost the equivalent of like, why are you showing a R-rated movie at 12 o'clock in the afternoon when kids are home on a channel that is accessible to children. Like that's sort of how I would equate it in a modern day sense. Like that sort of feeling of like, why is that out there? How is that this accessible to children? You know, why is it that they can flip a channel going from Disney to this channel, and all of a sudden, if they do, they'll see someone hacking a person to death and boobies and a crazy amount of swear words that just fly out of the mouth. Like, I think people don't see it that way, but that's how I always sort of interpret it, is that it was not at all a criticism against Joe, but just what the Daily Volcano stood for. And I think most adaptations somehow blend the two, and it makes Friedrich not look the greatest when it's such a shame.
Yeah, it's really sad because I think a lot of people use that against him, but then it's not in the book. And it's so annoying. I get this a lot from Joe and Laurie fans. Well, Friedrich hated Joe's writing. It doesn't happen in the book. And then in the book, it's actually Laurie who doesn't really, it's not that he's against of Joe writing, but when he proposes, he expects that Joe is going to stop writing and be sort of this mother figure wife for him. That's no good. And in the 1949 film, I think it's very subtle. There is a scene where Laurie sort of doesn't understand why Joe wants to work. So it's a nice comparison to that Joe and Friedrich scene. Not only does he give him the feedback, but also inspires her to become a better writer.
In the 49 version, like you said, she's like, oh, like I need it for the money. He's like, well, I've got plenty of that. So like, and he's still so confused. And it's like, it's not just the money. It helps, but it's her creative outlet. And like you said, it's very subtle, but like it does point out that he doesn't get it, that just because it doesn't offer something that can't already be had. To him, he thinks, well, I can give you the money, so you don't have to worry about writing. Like, he doesn't realize that that's like a passion.
I think that's also reflected to the way Laurie views his music, because he always speaks about how he's going to compose this great opera, but then he doesn't really do the work.
Yeah. And again, I think people don't realize that, like, when they read the first book, they just kind of go like, oh, so that's it. She just, quote unquote, gave up and never wrote again. And it's like, well, no, she does manage to write. And I think that they try to sort of give you that feeling when you see in the adaptations him helping her to publish a story, whether it's the sort of Little Women itself, or as I kind of like in the 1949 version where it's the My Beth story. I totally understand when people do that, because her writing Little Women, because it's supposed to be like we all know that the Marches are the fictional version of the Alcotts, but I feel like when you go a little too far, you're sort of blending what is real and what's fiction, almost crossing the streams, as they say in Ghostbusters, which is something that really happened in Gerwig's version, which confused the hell out of me, particularly with the doesn't she end up with Friedrich kind of ending, which I did not think was a great end. But I like that the idea that he follows her work, and I think if he was going to publish anything, it'd be the My Beth sort of story or poems, however it is. And I think it's only in the 2017 version, the Masterpiece one, where we see, well, I don't think we actually see it, but I feel like we get hints of it in the 1978 version, that we see Friedrich kind of following Joe's writings after New York. And that tells a lot, that he genuinely is watching how she progresses and is very proud of her, to the point of cutting it out and putting it on his fireplace, as like almost as if like, you know, look at what the woman that I'm in love with just did. Isn't that like amazing? Like, for everyone to see if they ever came into his room, like, look at this.
But I really, really hate it when they portray Joe and Frederick like they argue and then she returns back to Concord. And I hate it when that happens. And it's in the 1994 film and 2019 film.
As much as I don't like that, comparing the two, the 94 version did it better where it felt more like, oh, these two are just like friends and they got like into a little argument. Whereas in the 2019 version, it's like, yeah, I sat there just like after that argument, I was like, for the first time ever, I was like, I hate Joe. And I never said that. We had to take a moment between, because we had to do something in the middle and we were kind of discussing it. I was like, I've never said this, but I hate Joe. And it was amazing to me how, again, Gerwig just, I don't know, it was so confusing. She almost made past Joe seem almost more mature than current storyline Joe, because I like looked at the screen like, you did not just say that, like when Friedrich is trying to tell her like his criticism, and like for her to full blown out and say like, you know, quite literally, I might be paraphrasing it, but it's the same feeling of you're mean and I don't like you and I don't want to be your friend. Like that sounds like what a 5-year-old would say. Like that doesn't sound very mature. If you were trying to sort of, again, I can go on about the sort of split ending, how in neither way will Joe be happy. But if you're trying to make me believe that in the Joe gets with Friedrich storyline that it's going to be a happy ending, it's not, because we barely see any real interactions with them. For most of the time, she seems to be ignoring him, probably only at the dance. That's probably like their one time where we actually see them have any sort of like, oh, they like each other. But other than that, it's like she ignores him or she's yelling at him. And like, then I'm supposed to believe that she's in love with him and that we got to go chase him down, which I didn't like Meg and Amy following her to the train station. But yeah, I just sat there going like, it's not a happy ending, even if I tried to make myself believe that Joe ends up with Friedrich part, because it doesn't seem like to that end that she was really all into him and almost seemed forced to it. Like, I don't know, like maybe that's just me, but that was what I took from it, was just that either the one story line of she gets her novel published but is lonely after that whole big speech and her writing the letter to Laurie, which never happens in the book, of saying, I will marry you, and then to find out that Laurie is with Amy, she is still, even though she has her book published, she is still very lonely. Or you go with the timeline of her with Friedrich, there's no proper development to make me think, first of all, what does Friedrich see in this Joe? Because this Joe seems totally disinterested and even mean towards you, unless you're a glutton for that kind of thing. And where in the hell did that whole, you know, I love you sequence come? It felt more like a sort of desperation to have someone in her life, which is why neither one of these endings, I feel, is a happy ending, because it doesn't feel honest. It doesn't feel true to either one. And it's one, why would you do a split ending like that? I'm assuming to try to pander to those who are pro-Friedrich versus anti-Friedrich. But either way, no matter who you are, it's not a happy ending for Joe either way.
Yeah, I remember Jimena from the other art blog. She said that whole scene of Joe shouting at him made her feel very uncomfortable. And then she read the book and it was completely different. And she was really shocked by it. I talked to Albert Schooler, Susan Bailey, and I remember that she told me that she felt that Gerwig's film was all about money. Well, if you think about it, it tries to appeal to asexuals, LGBTQ community, Joe and Laurie shippers, those who want Joe to be a spinster and those who want Joe to be with Frederick. And none of the characters doesn't have any kind of storyline because of this open ending. So it's all about the money and hate speech, because if you think about it, he made a hate speech complaining about Friedrich's accent and him being German. When I read the 2019 film guide, Gerwig also said that she felt really sad how Louisa May Alcott rewrote her life to her books. So I got this feeling that Gerwig, she must have had some kind of feeling that, well, Little Woman was a wish fulfillment and that she was very lonely, and that's why she wrote these happy endings to her characters. And yet Gerwig decided to go with this open ending and to make fun of the novel. Yeah, I think the 2019 film is all about money. I personally don't believe anything that Gerwig has said because they don't match with anything that Louisa May Alcott has written or said, especially when you know the context about her love life. I actually find the film very problematic in when it comes to Little Woman research and Louisa May Alcott research, because I get so many people asking me things to clarify things that happen in the 2019 film and then don't happen in the book. I read this blog post on Tumblr from someone who had seen the 2019 film, and then they were trying to explain why Laurie. And they said, oh, it's because Jo just wanted to live happily free in New York, or that she wanted to travel the world. And I'm like, well, I've read the book. Jo is not very happy when she's in New York. And somebody also commented that when people think about Jo being alone in New York and happy, they are thinking Sex and the City or some other modern TV series. Because when the book Jo is in New York, she's actually 90% of the time with Fritz, and then 10% of the time she's with kids, or then she's writing about her writing. But honestly, most of the time she's somehow with Fredrik in different situations. When she writes to home, it's all about Fredrik in her letters. And she spends a year in New York, very long time when you are trying to get to know someone. When I think about Jo and Fredrik in New York, neither one of them actually really cares to be there that much. Fredrik has this dream that he could have a family and maybe live somewhere in the countryside, or have more of a closer connection with nature, or establish himself as a teacher again. And then Jo has this wish that she could live close to her family and have her own family there as well.
And again, that's why it makes me feel like most versions' timing of Jo going to New York being seen as almost being like, gotta get away. And on one hand, you know, it's, I think for Jo, it's kind of like, you know, I was promised to go to Europe and I'm itching to just kind of go somewhere, but not forever. I will want to come back. I just need to see something, and maybe it will be good for the writing. But like you said, she doesn't want to leave home really, and it's not until that she makes a friend with Friedrich that she kind of feel more comfortable to be in New York, because I think if she didn't, she would not have been there for as long as she was. I think she probably would have been there for like a few months and been like, okay, I'm really missing home. Like there's not much here for me. I'll just go back. But Friedrich is what helps her feel much more comfortable being in New York. And it's almost a sense of, with him, a home away from home, that they both understand each other and they both have that same sort of familiarity that makes homesickness feel better. But yeah, I think if there was no Friedrich there, she would not have stayed as long as.
Yeah, I agree. It's like they are both having the same goal of wanting to have a shared home. And I think with Friedrich, especially because he's an immigrant, it really affects to that idea. I think in German they even have a name for it. It's called Heimweg nach dem Fremde, idea of a romanticized home. It means that there is a sort of a familiarity within a person or a place. So I think both Jo and Friedrich had that similar idea what a home meant for them. And then they saw that in each other. You have this fan fiction series of the modern day Little Woman. I enjoy a few other people. And you write about Jo and Friedrich being demisexuals. Would you like to share the listeners what a demisexual is? I identify myself somewhere in the demisexual area, and I always need to explain it to people.
The best way I saw someone describe it, asexual is when you have no sexual desire at all. And if you're allosexual, it means you're you can have it just at a drop out of hat, pretty much. Like, but the best way I saw someone describe it is, for someone who is demisexual, is I'm asexual until I'm not. And the moment when you're not is when you develop a romantic attraction towards someone. And I understand some people who have that sort of wish fulfillment of wanting certain characters to be LGBT. Like, I've seen a lot of people will say that Joe is trans, but, you know, and whatnot. But it's surprising when people say, like, you know, I think Joe is aro-ace, meaning aromantic and asexual. And I'm like, I feel like Joe is more of the demi-romantic, which is you don't develop a romantic attraction until you really get to know them, or having a romantic interest in someone until you truly get to know someone, which is like, you know, for some people it'd be like, you just met this person, talked to them for 5 minutes, want to go on a date, and they're like, all right, fine. A demi-romantic needs time of development in order for them to be kind of like, you know what, I think I might want to date you. But I think I see her as a demi-romantic and a demisexual, and Friedrich as a demisexual, because these two, and it's mentioned under the umbrella scene where he says first love is the best, and she agrees, meaning that the both of them have been each other's first loves. So I definitely catch some of those sort of vibes in that sense of like the fact that they haven't really seemed to have found much of an interest in other people in accepting each other. And I feel like, as personally a demisexual, like for the longest time I was like, now it like, I didn't know why I was like, didn't have that same interest as like the other kids when they were developing and all that. And I'm like, oh, now it makes sense, like why I don't. I almost feel like Joe has that, like she can't find herself having that with Laurie. One of these days, I think I will revamp that series, but I sort of have like this moment where in the modern day sense, she tells Laurie, like, if it hasn't happened by now, it's never going to happen. And if all these years I have been with you and have not felt even remotely romantic attraction for you, it's just not going to happen. The fact that, you know, she doesn't even think about that with Laurie and blushes at the idea of it with Friedrich, I think is very telling. So I think it's a shame that people sort of miss on that. And in some ways I feel like incorrectly, like, you know, well, she's a lesbian because she doesn't want to get married. And it's like, that's not the reason why she doesn't want to get married to anyone. It's not because she's a lesbian, it's because other things that she, you know, has to relearn over time. And she definitely, as we sort of joke, she definitely wants Friedrich's babies. Like she wants, like you said, she wants a family of her own. And at one point, it was after Joe gets Plumfield, like she's already fantasizing of not only a school for kids to come in, but she's already fantasizing a family with Friedrich and how that's going to be. So like this girl wants his babies and gets all flustered and is like, do I look all right? It's like, oh my goodness, like, you know, we kissed and all that kind of stuff. I feel like that most people just don't. It's because I think they see movie versions of it and they sort of see it in this way. Like, you know, I guess if it's not Laurie, then let her be a lesbian or let her be aro-ace. But it's like we can still have an LGBT character in Joe, but still let it be with Friedrich. There's not a wrong answer here. We can have both. And I feel like there's contextually evidence of that, as I kind of had mentioned earlier, just comparing how Joe is with Friedrich versus Joe with Laurie. If I ever could get a chance to like make my own version, I would make that be pretty clear. Like in my vision, my modern day verse would be very clear. Like, no, Joe and Friedrich are demis and they are totally for each other. So yeah, that's sort of my personal headcanon, which I've seen quite a few people sort of hop on board with that idea, which I'm quite pleased with, because I think not only is it true to the character, I think people don't recognize or fully like remember like demisexual is a thing. I think it's just like people kind of think you either want to or not. And it's like, well, here's the middle ground, the gray area, gray sexual, and that doesn't make them any less valid or invalid. Like that, it's still a very valid thing to be a demi whether it's demi-romantic or demisexual. So it makes me happy to see that there's sort of this rise in people seeing like, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. And I'm like, good, we're on the same page.
Well, I've done research on the Victorian idea of love, what love meant for people in the 19th century. I actually think demisexuality in modern standards would be closest to that, because there is this pop culture idea of love where you have sort of separated sex from love, and then the transcendentalists, the Victorian people, they saw love as almost like a spiritual experience. You could not separate love from sex. So there were people who did that back then, but a romantic love, which leads on to marriage, you would not separate the two. So I think demisexuality, sometimes it's seen almost as a movement against this sort of sexualization of media, or the way we are surrounded by sexual images, the stories where sex and love is removed from one another. When you fall in love with somebody, you get into a higher spiritual sphere. So I think demisexuality is connected to that type of idea, that you are not against sex. You just want to be with somebody who you feel emotional connection with. That's the way I always read Rose and Frederick's relationship.
Like, it's not necessary for them to have this fully blown romantic relationship, but it just would be nice. If they chose not to, that's like, that's great. Like you said, it's more of what it is that connects them that way than it is what the sex is, just kind of a nice bonus to a romantic relationship.
Louisa May Alcott, she did have older and younger male friends who she was attracted to. But then she also had quite a clear idea what kind of relationship she wanted for herself. It included that intellectual connection. 2018 film, the modern version, actually did that pretty well. At least in that one, I got the sense that Joe and Frederick were both demisexuals. And I think the actors had pretty good chemistry.
We see them developing a relationship. Like, I always just kind of remember the scene in the theater when he takes her hand and she just kind of looks at him like, oh, what is this feeling? Like, oh, crap. Like, she's not like, she's like, what is this? I feel something. Yeah, I definitely get that feeling that it's probably the one version I feel like is the closest to that kind of sense. Like you said, that they're both demis and that they're more interested in how their relationship develops than, in any other way. Emotionally.
I really like that version when it comes to Joe and Freddie Frederick.
Yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised by that version, like, because sometimes modern day versions, it can be difficult in regards to how do they translate certain things that happened back then. Like, how do you still get that same sense of a debutante ball? Like, what would be the modern day equivalent? It's like, oh, well, be smart about it. It doesn't exactly have to be the same essence. You just need a big party. What's a big party? Prom. But they managed to do very well quite a lot of the things. In the story, in the sort of canon verse that Joe cuts her hair to get money for her father, and it's like, well, how do you still get that same feeling? She cuts it to support Beth, who gets, I think it's like leukemia in that version.
Yeah.
So you still get that same sense of like, oh, she cut her hair for a noble cause, but in this case, the noble cause is for Beth. So it still has that same feeling of what Joe does. I know that some people like kind of get upset. Like, I saw someone get upset that it wasn't like the ice skating, but that it was a horse that could see me to almost like get herself like get seriously harmed. And I'm like, what? Well, first of all, I don't think that really was that bad of a change, like, honestly. And it makes sense because nowadays there isn't a lot of those sort of open lakes for people to go ice skating. There's more ice skating rinks available for the public. Whereas with, like, if you're riding a horse, there is the danger of if you go a little too fast, the horse suddenly stops when you're supposed to jump over a thing and you fall off. Like, I think that's a very fair way of translating it. But I didn't know. I went into it with low expectations because I didn't want to get my hopes up. And I walked out being like, this is top 3, I'll say, of favorite adaptations, honestly.
Well, people can really tell how much demisexuals we are, because it's so absurd to us when people are complaining about the actors' looks.
Yeah.
When I posted some of the clips of the 2018 film to my YouTube channel, and people were just saying how gorgeous Ian Bohen is. Like, I'm not saying he's not gorgeous, but can we talk about something else, like their relationship? Hopefully, maybe this helps people to understand what a demisexual is. Yeah, Ian Bohen he's very handsome, but there's so much more in that movie. Same with Rosanna Brass in the 1949 film. Like, people just say, oh, he's gorgeous. Can we talk about his and Joe's relationship in this movie? That's why I posted these clips to this channel.
Can we talk about the fact that he pretty much is like, I think you are an amazing writer and I support you. You go, girl. Like, yeah, behind that pretty face, there's honestly, I say Friedrich is a feminist icon, honestly. Like, he would definitely be that guy that is just like, that's my wife, like, and be 100% proud. It took Laurie to sort of, I think, time to get to that point, but like Friedrich right off the bat is like, women are awesome and I love them. But yeah, that's yeah, I totally agree. Like, everyone was like, oh, Louis Guerra's, probably the handsomest Friedrich, and I'm like, okay, fine, but is he going to be a good Friedrich? And I think he was probably the highlight of that film. I think he himself is a good actor, but like, talk about whether or not, like, is the relationship between Joe and Friedrich actually good or not? Why does it matter? Or like when people say like, oh, why that guy? He looks way too old, or he's not as attractive. It's like, did you see that moment when like he just said, I have nothing to give but a full heart and empty hands? Like, how? Like, oh my God. Guys, when you see people talk about like, oh, I love those like angsty romance heroes who love someone, but they want them to be happy, like almost like a Colonel Brandon type. I'm like, there's Friedrich right there. Like, he doesn't think that he is deserving of Joe, but he supports her. And when he gets to Concord and he feels like there's maybe hope, he's got a picture of Joe and he kisses it because he's like, I'm so happy to see you again. And I think there might be a chance, like, ooh, there's so much. But no, people want to talk about, is he attractive or not? And it's like, point here, you go way over.
Somebody posted on Twitter that scene where in the 2017 series he comes and he has that poem with him. I'm like, this is my favorite scene in this whole series. And then there are people commenting, well, he's not attractive. I don't care. I've been thinking about this a lot, or the whole asexual conversation. I think coming from the fact that I guess people should know that in the Victorian times, sex was entirely censored. Because when I was reading these studies of Henry David Thoreau to my podcast, he actually censored words like bedroom and bathroom and all the names of his love interest from his diaries. Sometimes you can see how he changed word devotion and worship to great admiration. And Louisa May Alcott did the same. Some of the things might be lost when we don't pay attention to the historical context. And I think you can see that in Little Woman, because in the chapter All Alone, there's this a scene where the narrator says that don't pity the spinster because a lot of them hide tragic romances behind their humble gowns, or something like that. So I was thinking, she's talking about her lovers, or this wish fulfillment that we have been discussing here. I read quite a few people saying that, oh, I'm like Joe. I don't want to get married. I just want to stay at home, be with my family. And I'm like, well, that's not the book, Joe, because she does not want to only stay at home. She feels that she needs to take Beth's place, and she needs to take care of her parents and be this like spirit of the home. And then she does that for a couple of days, and she gets bored, and she feels like this is not the life for me. What I really want is to live my own life, have a family, and find somebody. And that's when she gets this letter from Amy where she writes how happy she is with Laurie. And then she feels pretty lonely and envious their happiness. It makes me upset that people misread the book. So, well, in this case, they probably don't read the book. If we want to understand Little Woman better, we should not ignore these things that happen in the novel.
And it's funny when you said, like, oh, I want to be just like Joe, where I don't get married and I stay home. I'm like, that sounds closer to who Beth is rather than Joe. Like, and yeah, it's amazing how people sort of misinterpret. And I don't want to tell people exactly, like, when people say things like, I see Joe as being trans and wanting to be a boy, and I'm like, fine, but like, the reasoning you have behind it is that you think Joe acts like a boy because she truly wants to be a boy, and that's not exactly how it goes in the story. It's more of a wanting the freedoms that a boy has. And again, as we mentioned earlier about, you know, sort of the internalized misogyny that she has about being a girl. I don't want to be that person that says you're wrong, but on the other hand, like, the reasoning you have behind it is not true to what the story actually portrays these characters to be. It can be a little tough.
I think it's really sad because, you know, that whole chapter, All Alone, it's really miserable. I don't know anyone who can read that chapter and think that Joe just wants to be at home. I can't really think of anyone who can read, you know, Amy's letter about Laurie and think that Joe envies Amy or Laurie. She envies that sister is happy and married, and then she herself is there at home trying to be something that she isn't. And then she has that discussion with Mommy, and she says that, well, you know, Joe, it's okay if you want these other things. There's this preface that moment when Joe is looking at Meg with a baby. She says to her, do you think I could do a good job at being a mom? And Meg is like, oh, well, it would be great. You know, you would make a great mom.
So yeah, I agree. I think some versions, like the Gerwig version, make it seem like she's more jealous of Amy, of being with Laurie, and I'm like, not at all. Not at all. She's just more sad that there isn't a someone in her life, really. The same way that, whether it's Amy or Meg, she's in a way jealous of them both, not because of the men themselves, but because there is no one for her.
It was the same with Louisa May Alcott. She writes in her journals how she envied Anna and May. They were happily married. She wasn't. She was very lonely. You can definitely see that in Little Woman. And I've always thought it was really interesting because when I read May Alcott's biography, it was mentioned that all the three sisters, May and Anna and Louisa, they had struggles finding partners for themselves because they wanted to find somebody who would love them, but also accept that they wanted to work or have a career. May wrote about herself being lonely because she really struggled finding someone who could support her artist career. Then she fell in love with Ernest. He supported her career and was a good husband, what I can tell. I think it tells a lot about 19th century world. These women feel lonely because they can't find somebody who supports their career and gives them unconditional love. I think that's something that most people don't realize about Little Woman, is that she wants to have a career, then she also wants to combine that with family and love.
Yeah, and it wasn't the norm then. Like, you know, they were sort of expected to, once you're married. That's, being married is your job. And this is, I would going off of how I think with Alcott that translates to Joe, which I sort of took into my own. They want to be married. They want to have someone. But again, between society telling them, you know, you can't, you have to abide by these rules in order to find someone, or being told you have to change in order to get this. It can be very depressing. As I made a post, and you did see it, where I kind of went onto almost like a analysis of Joe and marriage. I think she, even as like a teenager, somewhere in the back of her head must have been like, I do want to get married because, I don't know, like, why not? I want to be with someone that has the same interest, but she never felt like it was for her because people told her it was not for her. And I kind of compare that to how I felt growing up. I am like 4'11". I'm curvy. If you had to try to pick a name, I am plump. I've got a belly and I've got, breasts that are definitely bigger and hips and whatnot. And growing up, it was difficult to find clothes that were for me, that was perfectly suited for me, that I liked, because it was either the pants are too long and I gotta roll them up, or that dress is cute, but it's meant for someone who is on the thinner side with a flat stomach and smaller breasts, and it fits here, but when you get to the hips, it does not fit there. After a while, I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to say I don't care what I look like. And I put like this sort of explanation of, well, if anybody really would like me, they're going to like me with it, whether or not I dress this way. But it's like I felt like the fashion industry didn't care how to dress me. They didn't care whether or not this would have fit me. And I think in a way Joe had that sort of feeling, that sense of, well, I guess if everyone's telling me that I'm too tall, I'm too loud, I am too this and that to be married, just as I had deep down cared that I wanted to look good, but being told pretty much your whole life that you're not suited for that kind of thing. And if you don't fit the mold of what is this idea of marriage, well, then I guess you won't get married. And I think Alcott felt the same way. And in her case, she never did get married. And tying into that sort of wish fulfillment writing, that she gives that to Joe, that she has this whole time feeling like, I guess I'm not suited for marriage because who's going to want to marry me? And then meets Friedrich, who is like, I love you for all that you are, and my idea of marriage is this way. I was, I guess, tailored to be your husband just because I feel the same way too. And I don't think people realize that when we talk about Joe and marriage, that Joe doesn't repel the idea of marriage because she doesn't want to be in love, or she doesn't want children, or even like this sense of independence. She thinks that marriage will tie you down because that's what the time period, as I kind of said earlier, being married is a job. It's a full-time job. That's all that she's going to do, and that's not what she wants. It takes her some time to sort of realize, and through her relationship with Friedrich, that you can be independent and married. You can have both. It's not choose one or the other. And I think people sort of misinterpret that because they just think, almost the same way as Joe starts in the beginning, that she thinks you can't have one without the other. And I think that's a shame, because it's a very, and again, almost in a way a misogynistic sort of point of view, because it ties in with that, you want to be that feminine woman who gets married and is a stay-at-home mom and whatnot. Like I feel like if Meg wanted, like in the modern day, she would probably be more like a stay-at-home mom or something of that kind, and probably would get judged for it. It doesn't mean that you're not independent. You made the choice to want to be, a stay-at-home mom or to be a wife, and that doesn't mean that all of a sudden you lose any sense of self. It just means you've started this whole new other journey that can lead to something more of who you are as a person, and to get to spend it with someone that you love and trust enough to want to spend that journey, hopefully to the end of your lives.
And in the book, it's really Amy and Meg are the conventionally good-looking ones, so they are expected to get married. Beth and Joe are not expected to get married because of the way they look. Beth was socially awkward. Joe had issues with her anger. Some men of the time probably considered her too independent, with her wanting to become a writer. When Joe reads the novel in the first part, The White White World, it's so funny because when I read White White World, this story is just like Joe and Friedrich in Little Woman, the leading character in White White World. But she kind of has that similar situation. She doesn't really consider herself very pretty or attractive, and she feels that, nobody's going to love me because of the way I am. And then she finds this pretty clear archetype character, and then they fall in love. So it's really interesting how that's integrated into the story of Little Woman. But obviously it was somehow a significant story to Louisa May Alcott, because if you believe that, you are not word of romance or love, and then you have these stories that you read which prove otherwise. You must have found some inspiration there. There's one story that has this sort of Laurie archetype, who starts with this Joe type of character and then moves on to this character who is more similar to Amy. This transition happens, he also grows as a man. So I can see very clear connections to this literature that Louisa liked to read, and also these real life events that happened in her life and her relationships.
I was going to say, and I think it's interesting when you look at the bigger picture of, in general, how Alcott deals with marriage, because not all of them have the same kind of marriage. Like if you're going to look at how Meg and John's relationship develops, Laurie and Amy's relationship develops, and Joe and Friedrich's, they're not all the same. I think it takes a good writer to sort of make it be different enough, because it's just very easy to just be like, well, this is what I would want a marriage to be, and I'll make them all be the same. But like, you have different types of people and how they respond and react to things. And Meg and John kind of getting to that fight after the jam incident, that sort of thing I would never imagine happening between Joe and Friedrich, because their personalities are completely different between Meg and John's, particularly in the beginning of the marriage. And I think that it shows that not only what it is that I think Alcott in general was expecting and hoping a marriage would be, but understood that the realities of marriage for some people may not always be easy. For someone like Meg, who has always kind of had these dreams of having a little bit of money, would have these feelings of like, why can't we do this? And John, who's trying to help her, versus like Amy and Laurie, where money is not an issue and it is whatever they could want, they can get. And Joe and Friedrich, who are like, you know what, we both already know, we have no delusions of grandeur. We know that we're very hard working people and we will work to be successful. But ultimately, they are all healthy relationships. They're just different. And I think that for someone who never got married herself, I think Alcott really understood that not every marriage is the same, but that doesn't mean that they're not good in their own way. It works for them. And I think it really shows that if you had paired, again, someone like Laurie with Joe, they would have clashed and not have moved forward in the same way. When you try to look at it in the bigger picture of these characters and their relationships with each other and with the people that they're with, it tells a lot, and I think it tells a lot of Alcott, who clearly was thinking a lot about marriage and its ups and its downs. Remember, you said, I'm pretty sure it was you, where you said that Meg and John were the more grounded type, Laurie and Amy are the romantic type, and then Joe and Friedrich somehow are a mix of the two. Like, they're grounded in the sense of like what is the realistic, but like they are deeply romantic with each other, and that it carries on through the years.
One of my friends said that Louise writing all these things to her journals, how she was lonely and envied her sister's marriages and how she wanted to get married. It was not something that she could say to the public if she had this fear that people would pity her because she was a spinster. But also that during that time, it would not be something even appropriate to tell that I'm not married because I'm lonely. She was always afraid that she would lose her face. I've been reading this now from a couple of different sources that she paid Daddy Wisniewski some money, that he would not go to the press and chat about their, I don't know if it was an affair or a kiss or something more. But I think it pretty clearly that Louisa was afraid that people would find out that she had affairs with men.
Yeah.
I think it was one of the Alcott studies that I read that Louisa and her publisher they were the ones who came up with the spinster image so that they could sell her books, especially for the children, because the children were her target audience. Even though nowadays a lot of people see Little Women more as a young adult novel, or some people even as an adult novel, but back then it was really targeted for children. I don't think Little Woman is necessarily a children's book, because I think it opens up a lot better when you have some years behind you.
Right.
But I think it explains a lot about why people have so many misconceptions about Louisa and marriage. There is a very big difference between this public image that Louisa and her publisher, Thomas Niles, created for her so that they could sell her works. And then there is this private Louisa who had these crushes to her older male friends, and I think she did fall in love to Henry David Thoreau, and she had a fling with Lady Wisniewski. She was a very passionate woman who did want career and a romance and marriage. I also read the early Alcott schoolers because they didn't really want to make the difference between the two. They cut out all these certain parts about her diaries and didn't include them into the public statements about Louisa May Alcott. It's really interesting when you go back to the Louisa May Alcott research and how in different time periods certain elements have been removed from Louisa May Alcott studies. I think I read that in the 70s, when the 1970 series came out, there was this big anti-Frederick and anti-Laurie movement in Alcott research because of that series, the way it portrayed Laurie and Frederick. And I kind of understand that, because I don't think that series does a really good job with portraying the male characters. But then it's also a really shame in terms of the research, if you take this very angry feminist approach to the male characters.
The BBC version you're talking about, right?
Yeah, the one where Frederick is really angry when he finds out that Jo has been writing sensational stories.
Yeah, that one is a very unusual version. I also remember that they did, like, Mr. March felt a little weird. Like, I was like,
yeah,
like, that doesn't seem right to his character to just kind of be oblivious like that. Because, like, the one scene that stands out particularly is when Friedrich comes to visit, and he's like, oh my God, it's you, and like takes her into like the study and just doesn't even realize that, like, oh, maybe Jo wanted to see Friedrich. Like, I was like, that seems so totally not in character with Mr. March. And like, I don't know, it was like, it is a very unusual version. And not to say that the BBC couldn't do a version of Little Women, because obviously they're British and more American, but like, it almost felt at times like it was making fun of it. Like, they kind of had moments where I was just like, I don't know if you're making fun of the story or not. Like, there was something very off about it, which I almost felt it was a shame, because it does have some good moments. Like, I think the actress that plays Jo is good. Like, she could have been a really good Jo. She seemed to have that same sort of characteristic, and had a really good Laurie proposal scene. I thought that was actually, again, one of the closest to how the novel plays it out. And you really do kind of sit there like, Laurie, you little jerk, like, just leave her alone. It's tough. And that one, for anyone that doesn't know, because I took the time to do it, that is so far to date the only version that has an actual German Friedrich.
Half German, half English, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my thing, the post that I made, because one day I was just so bored. I was like, let me just see how many of them are actual Germans versus, yeah, so I found it. For anyone that is curious, Paul Lucas from the 33 version is Hungarian. Rossano Brazzi from the 49 version is Italian. Then Frederick Jaeger from the 1971 that we're discussing is German. Shatner from 78 two-parter is Canadian. Gabriel Byrne from 1994 is Irish. Mark Stanley from the Masterpiece Theater miniseries is English. Ian Bowen from the modern day one is American, and Louis Garrel is French. I was just curious one day. I was just like, let me just research this, and I gotta say, as unusual as the 1970 version is, it had that going for him, but I was like, that's a shock. Like seriously, only out of out of all of those, and that's mainstream versions, one of them is the closest to how the book version is, which is very, very bizarre.
Yeah, it's not very loyal to the book. I think they did a really good job with Amy and Laurie in Europe. The dialogue was very close to the book, but then it also had that scene of Laurie catfishing Meg, which also in the book, but then I got so mad because they framed it to be Meg's fault. That would not run today because it was all Laurie's fault.
Right, and it's not fair to say that's Meg's fault when why would she ever suspect that, you know, Laurie would ever do such a thing? Because as harmless as his other tricks before, she probably was just like, whatever, but that was not harmless. That was a very mean thing to do, and that's like the moment where you're kind of like, Laurie, that was very low of you to go that way. But again, I'm not a fan of any version that has an adult playing Amy, and I think as good as she was, like you said, when she's more an adult and they're in Europe, I think that's a good sequence. But as a child, she just that actress got on my nerves. I couldn't stand listening to her screech that way. So it was the same thing with that Amy in the 1978 version. It just was like, oh my God, just grow up. You are a grown up, so act like it.
You cannot have an adult woman playing a child without making the character looking immature. It happens every time, every single time.
And I do say I give props to the 1949 version that obviously when you look at them, Margaret O'Brien is younger than Elizabeth Taylor. So in that one, they actually switched it to be that Amy is older than Beth. While that is not accurate, I can appreciate that they did try to accommodate it so that way it doesn't look wrong. Like, again, you can't convince me that Margaret O'Brien is older than Elizabeth Taylor. So far, only the 94 version and the 2008 modern day version actually did do a split between child Amy and adult Amy. And it makes Amy so much more sympathetic when you kind of look at her like she's just a little girl. She wants to be with the older sisters, which is something I relate to. I mean, I'm the youngest of four, and my sister is 5 years older than me. So I always kind of had that feeling of like, can I come too? And it's like, no, you're not old enough for this. No, you can't, because, you know, this is something that only, let's just say if I was 10 and she was 15, like, sorry, only teenagers can do this, or you're not old enough for that. Like, so I definitely can identify with Amy of that feeling of, but I want to join too. It's not fair. Like, and you feel bad because you're just like, no, she's just a little kid. But when you do get like an older actress playing the part and doing the whole book burning scene, it doesn't feel as sympathetic to Amy, and you do have that sort of feeling of like, well, Jo's right to be mad at her for as long as she has, because she's an adult and she should know better. Whereas with the little kid, it's like, it was really bad that she did that, but you got to understand she is a little kid. Be a little bit more forgiving towards her. I don't know why they feel the need to. The only thing I can think of is that they kind of, I'm assuming in general, Hollywood, when they do like cast a older actress to play a younger person to try to carry out, is that they think that somehow you're going to lose momentum or you lose something in that. But I'm like, I can't buy, as much as I do like Lily James, I can't buy Lily James being a young Natasha in War and Peace. She's a little bit too mature looking to be a 12-year-old. If you told me 16, I'd be like, that's a stretch, but whatever, I can buy that more than 12. I don't really understand it, and it really loses a lot of the character for me.
One of the things that came out about Amy in the book is that when she was 12, what she really wanted was Jo's approval. Well, she wanted Jo to like her, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think Jo also resented that Amy was so feminine, and there's nothing wrong with her being feminine either. One of the things that I really liked about part 2 was this description how Jo and Amy would fight about something, and then they would burst out laughing when they realized that this is really stupid, this argument that we're having. Amy wasn't anti-Jo, or Jo wasn't anti-Amy. They were just sisters.
Again, I sort of draw parallels between my sister and myself. Like, I don't know if we were very close when we were younger. And it's the same with like no matter who you are, sibling-wise, you know, whether you're 2 boys, 2 girls, 1 boy, one girl type situation. But when you reach a certain age, you're like, I want to do the things I want to do and not have to spend all my time with my little sister or little brother. The younger sibling kind of feels like you're leaving me behind. But once you get to a certain age, you kind of almost reconnect. Like, I feel like I'm definitely closer with my sister now because now we're both adults and we both have that better understanding of each other. And not that there was never any love between us in all those years. There was. It just, in a way, and I think in general, children are unintentionally selfish. We just kind of go like, I want to do what I want to do at this age, and I don't care if my little sister wants to come along. It's what I want to do. Why should she? She can't come along, and I'm not going to accommodate for that because I've earned my years to be able to do this, and I'm not going to be held back by her. So yeah, I don't think that it was ever, like you said, anti-Joe, anti-Amy against each other. It was just whatever the points they were in their lives, it just did not lead them to be as close as they were. But as they gotten older, they sort of understand themselves better as well as each other, and that helped to create a more closer and more developed relationship where they can actually be more like friends. I think that people tend to pit them together because they both do so well with Beth. Between the two of them, they have a little bit more conflict. They grow out of it. And particularly, I felt with the Gerwig version, they put more attention on Joe and Amy's relationship and how it's symbolism because they're so different and contrasting each other. And it's just like, I don't know. I don't feel like there's that much thought into it. Just in general, that's just the nature of how sibling relationships are. You start off being like, oh, my little sister, my big sister. And then you grow into that age of, I want to do more of the adult things. And I don't want to be around my little sibling as much as I used to. And then sort of reconnecting because like, oh yeah, like now that we're sort of closer in the sense of age mentality, we can do those things together. So yeah, I think people overblow the Joe and Amy relationship as if it is this full-on sibling rivalry, which it really is not at all.
I was really surprised because when I did the research on Louisa May Alcott's relationship with May Alcott, there was some sibling rivalry between them when they were younger. Like I said about the Angry Feminist and the 70s version, I think a lot of the Alcott schoolers, well, not necessarily Alcott schoolers, but public in general, when they are interpreting Little Women in different times, they always tend to go to TV version or a film version instead of the book. When I was doing the research about the sisters, it really boggled my mind that there were so many Alcott schoolers who were writing how, Louisa envied May when she was living in Europe and she was hanging out with Laddie Wisniewski. Then I read these letters between Louisa and May. It seems that they both were fed up with him. And I also got this feeling that not only had Louisa given him money, I don't know if it was for, shutting him down for their fling or whatever it was, or if she wanted to help him financially, I don't know. It seemed that May might have also borrowed him money because she writes in a letter to Louisa that he never paid his debt back. And people are always saying, Niina, you really shouldn't hate Laurie that much. I don't hate Laurie. Laurie, he grows in his relationship with Amy, and I really like that. That's a big part of his character. But I can't deny the fact that all these real-life Lauries, Laddie Wisniewski and Alf Whitman, was also a friend of the Alcotts. Laddie was an adult man, and he seems to have been borrowing money from his wealthy friends and didn't really seem to be very reliable or very interested in work. And then I think May also wrote about Alf that, he seems to be a bit lost in life and doesn't really have a direction. And that sounds a lot like Laurie. I read so many bad studies about Louisa and May and how they were fighting, quote-unquote, fighting over Laddie, who was living in Paris the same time as May. Then it doesn't really align with the letters that the sisters wrote to each other. And why on earth would they fighting about this guy I think Louisa wrote Laurie to be this aspiring character who actually grows out from that disillusions that he has about artist life. It's not just Laddie and Alf who were models for Laurie. You can find it from all these different books that Louisa read and all these young men who she liked to hang out with. I think it's really dismissive for both the literal Joe and Amy and then the actual Louisa May Alcott and May Alcott to present them as these sisters who just were having this love and hate relationship and only thought about this guy who actually wasn't really that great. I actually really like Laurie in Ghost Boys and Little Man when he's helping Nat and he brings all these poor boys to Joe. He also always says that Joe was the one who raised him.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't speak about Joe as his first love or girlfriend. I just don't like the romanticization of the young Laurie. I think a lot of these Alcott schoolers who try to present Joe and Amy, these people who just fight over Laurie, it's not based on the book, that's based on the adaptations. I say the same about the people who say that, oh, Joe and Friedrich just argue. Well, they don't argue in the book. They argue in pretty much every single adaptation.
I always have felt that out of all of them, that Joe and Friedrich would be the ones that have the best communication skills because, like you said, they never argue or yell at each other. They always just somehow manage to discuss the situation. And I think people also sort of think that it's sort of like, they just know that, oh, Joe has a temper. And they think she carries that throughout, that she always has a temper, but like she knows how to control it by the time she goes to New York. And most of the adaptations will have a kind of like play out as if like, oh, there's that temper of hers, but like no, she kind of learns how to control it thanks to like Marmee and even Mr. March when he comes back. But it's also not in Friedrich's nature to be argumentative either. He's not a temperamental type of guy. And as we find, Joe has tempers when she reacts to something negatively in a very strong way. Like, we never see her yell at Beth. She never yells at Beth for anything, even if they do disagree, because why would you yell at Beth? She's the least offending person ever. And I feel if I had to compare Friedrich to any of the sisters, it would be to Beth. He is a very quiet, gentle soul who is, unlike Beth, is able to, when the moment needs to arise, he will stand up and say, no, I don't agree with that. He's more willing to put himself out there if the situation comes to it. He'll kind of sit there and be like, I may not agree, but that's fine. But if something, like as we see in the novel, when they're at the symposium and someone says something in regards to religion, that was like that moment where he's like, sorry, I need to stand up and say something, but in the nicest way possible, with strong facts to hold him behind. And that's when Joe gets an extra boost of respect for Friedrich. So it would be very surprising and almost negative towards Joe's character to say, one, that this temper that she's been working on all of a sudden comes back, and to say that she would yell at someone who is so unoffensive. Unlike with like Laurie, who like yells and says these very negative things towards her, does she respond negatively? Whereas with Friedrich, he approaches it in a very kind and more gentler way. So there is no reason for her to respond in that way. Yeah, I don't really understand why people feel that it's so important to have them argue when it's not close to who their characters are, and it changes how you sort of almost see their characters, because why would Friedrich act that way when he doesn't, and why would Joe yell at him when there's no reason to yell at him?
And I think Amy also had a very calming influence on Laurie. Amy is a very visual person, and then you have Laurie, who likes these very pretty things. He likes nice clothes, and well, in the modern context, he would be a metrosexual. He's a man who likes to take care of his looks, which is kind of opposite to my man Fritz. There are times when Joe makes fun of Laurie, like he likes to buy nice clothes, and fancy gloves, and Joe laughs about it because why are you spending your money in these irrelevant things? So she doesn't really have much appreciation for Laurie taking care of his looks. And one of my friends pointed out that all the three couples have their own special aesthetics, so to speak. Like John and Meg, they have this whole cottagecore aesthetic. And with Joe and Friedrich, they are not too picky. Joe was that kind of person who didn't really romanticize life, even though Joe and Fritz are a very romantic couple, like you said. But Joe was never a very visual person. In Little Man, it's almost like she and Fritz have this mutual agreement that Plumfield is going to be this topsy-turvy, upside-down place. If boys' sticky hands make places dirty, that's okay. And we can have pillow fights once a week so they can release their energy. And then it's completely different in the Lawrence house because Amy and Laurie, they like to have these fancy balls and dinner parties and things to be visually pleasing. And I always thought that Amy and Laurie were a match made in heaven because him being a metrosexual, for example, was something that Amy found visually pleasing. And of course, Joe found Frederick very attractive. I really love that scene when Amy and Laurie are in Europe and she taps his hand and says that this is like a lady's hand. You haven't done any work in your life. And Amy knows the struggles of being poor and Laurie doesn't have any experiences of that. And then Amy says that Joe hates lazy people. And Amy herself also hates lazy people. And that is Laurie's wake-up call. That's when he turns from a boy into a man. And that scene is never in any Little Woman adaptations between 1933 and 2019. Then if we think about Louisa May Alcott, she worked as a nurse in the war. She took care of sick people. She saw bodies lying around. She wasn't squeamish. Maybe because she didn't really consider herself very attractive always. And that also had to do with her illness. When you read Little Woman, there is sometimes criticism the way people tend to pay more attention to the way things look outside than the way they look inside. You know what I mean. Joe is not a very visual person.
I almost forgot about the pillow fights. I was like, oh, that's so adorable. But yeah, each relationship works out for each of them in the best way. Friedrich and Joe are a little bit more like, oh, let's just do whatever suits us at whatever time. And Laurie and Amy are like this people who are like, we have to have dinner ready by 5 every day because we just have to. No earlier, no later. But it works for them because that is the lifestyles that they want. And if you have someone like Joe who is like, let's just eat whenever, whatever, and Laurie is like, no, I want to have this specific time with this specific meal, that's going to clash. Again, I think that's what makes how she handles these relationships very well, that it's not even just like, oh, you can trade one sister for another. It's like, no, they're so different. Their relationship with Laurie is so different that it will not have the same outcome as you think that it will. You can't have Laurie just be with Joe and expect it to have the same outcome as Laurie and Amy. It just won't. Not at all. And it's funny, like this is in some ways it's a story of like opposites attracting as well as people who are similar attract. Like you often hear people say differently, like he was someone who is completely different from you, but then you have some people who are like, get someone that is completely the same to you. And I gotta find the passage, but I think Marmee kind of said it perfectly. This is when Joe wants to leave for New York, and Marmee says, I think it's not just because of you wanting to leave, it's also because of Laurie. I gotta find it, but she says that as friends you are very happy and your frequent quarrels soon blow over. I fear that you both would rebel if you mated for life. You are too much alike and too fond of freedom, not to mention hot-tempered and strong wills to get on happily with each other, in relation that needs infinite patience and forbearance as well as love. So on one hand, the fact that they are very similar is going to be detrimental to them. That would ruin their relationship, because really what makes a relationship work is what is similar about the two of you is your morals, your points of views on some of the bigger topics of things and of your interests. But you need to be different enough to allow some sort of growth to happen, because if you have two people who are exactly the same and have the same sort of ways of living life, there's a very slim chance, I think, of them progressing into something more deep and meaningful. I think, it's going to be a very kind of like, what do you want to do today? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. And then just you do nothing. Versus if you get someone that is at the very least a little different from you and you go, I don't know, what do you want to do? And it's like, well, why don't we do something a little different out of our comfort zone and let's do it. Let's go. Like, I think that in a way they both have that, like you said, Amy pushed Laurie to be more responsible and to sort of realize like what a grown-up he needs to be. And Friedrich kind of helps ground Joe and be, and not to say, like, he tells her, like, you can still have that dream. Like, you can still be a writer. You can do it. I believe that you can. In a way, they both, Amy and Friedrich, are what Joe and Laurie need, because in some ways they ground them, but also give them what it is that they need, not necessarily what they want. Laurie thinks what he wants is a housewife that is just going to do what he wants him to do. What he needed was a wife that is like, you know what, you could stand to do a few chores around this house. I think that's why some people feel like, have that idea of like, Joe and Laurie would be great together because they're so similar, but like, therein lies the problem. They're too similar and they're too like a reflection of each other. And I think if you spend too long and too often with someone that is just like you're going to see some of the more negative stuff about yourself and you're not going to like it. You're going to hate how you are as a person, and then you're going to maybe start resenting that person because you recognize some of the more negative stuff about yourself. You're like, you know what, I can grow and learn from this, but the person that you're with has not done the same. And you're like, I'm moving ahead and you're staying right there and we want different things. And so, yeah, I think no matter what, Joe and Laurie's relationship would have ended into the disaster, because one will grow and the other will not. And you can't have a relationship where you're not going together somewhere. If you eat, whether it's the both of you stay in the one place or one stays and one goes.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And you said that, Joe and Fred, they don't really have any reasons to argue. Henry and Louisa, what I've read, they had this sort of telepathic way of communication, that they would understand each other without words. I think you can see some of that in Little Woman, in Joe's and Frederick's, the way they communicate. And like you said, well, they probably have the least problems in communication when it comes to the different couples in Little Woman, because they know each other so well. So it's really interesting that Louisa and Henry would have this sort of telepathic rapport between one another. And, even though Louisa had temper tantrums, Henry was, what I've read, quite a peaceful person and didn't really care too much about arguing. I mean, I think it brings another extra layer to Little Woman and to Joe and Frederick's relationship. I think you can see a lot of that in Little Men, especially when they have this sort of teasing conversation between one another. Well, they really don't argue a lot in the sequels, and they don't argue in Little Woman. Why would they argue? They really don't. They don't have any big conflicts. Joe and Laurie are the ones who have the conflicts. And even with Meg and John, well, I think there was a reason for that argument. And after that, they were a better couple. Meg realized that she had problems with leaving behind this idea that she did wish that sometimes they would have more money. And John realized that, well, Meg has more needs.
It's a growing thing, it's not easy. I mean, I've not yet to have been in a relationship, but talking between them, my friend and seeing my sister go through some of her relationships, it's a growing thing. You gotta learn each other's idiosyncrasies, and you gotta learn, like, what does it mean to have another person in your life that is so close to you. It's just like when people say, like, when they have kids, they have that realization of like, oh, I just have realized that it's not going to just always be about me. Sometimes it's about them. And that doesn't mean that you necessarily are sacrificing the overall picture of what you want for them, but just kind of taking a step back and going, like, I got to realize that even though I approach this situation this way, it doesn't work when I go it with this person of whom I am living with and love and whatnot. So yeah, I think that with Meg and John, it was because they were already so shy with each other in the beginning of their relationship that it took a little bit more time for them to sort of understand what does it really mean to be in love and to be married. They're such an underrated Little Women couple. It's such a sweet little romance that it's like, oh, they love each other, and like, you know, watching them kind of blossom into these developed parents who truly care for their children, and surprisingly, John being a lot more hands-on than you'd expect any man from that time period to be hands-on with their kids. But yeah, it really goes to show that, you know, marriage is not always as easy as one would think.
In Little Woman, when there was the catfishing sequence, I think there was a moment when afterwards Meg was like looking that Laurie wasn't going to do any kind of jokes with John. She was keeping an eye on him more closely, because she didn't want nothing bad to happen to John. I think I would do the same if that happened to me. John is really underrated character. Like, I always love that scene when they're in the Camp Lawrence and he's defending Meg being a teacher. A governess. And he's like, oh, these American girls, they need to earn a living too.
Right.
Yeah, it's such a sweet scene.
I don't really think that moment in particular is really seen in any version. I mean, we do have certain versions that do have like the beach/boating scene, and those like first hints of like, you know, oh, I don't have any family to worry about. Meg being like, oh no, well, I would miss you if something were to happen. Like, it's precious, and you know, the fact that he is so patient with her, because like he knows that he loves her, but you know, he knows that maybe Meg isn't fully sure, but he's not pressuring her in the same way that the way Laurie would have. He just is like, it's all right, you know, I'll wait if you'd like, and I'm always here if you do realize that you do love me. But that's okay. You take your time. You do what you gotta do. Like, he is such a sweet character, and the fact that he just wants Meg to be happy, even at the sacrifice of getting a new coat for her to get a dress, is just so sweet. And it's such a big moment for Meg to kind of be like, you know what, I don't need a dress, I just need you. And it's such a lovely little relationship that really doesn't get as much love as the other two comparatively, and I think that's a shame.
Both Friedrich and John, they do parallel in that sense that they both feel at some point that they are not worth of this woman. With John is that Meg has all the pressure to marry a rich guy because she is the prettiest of the sisters. And especially Aunt Marge wants her to marry some rich man. And then there is that rumor going on that Meg has something going on with Laurie. And Mom is really mad about it, and which is understandable. But I think John also felt that he was too poor for her. Because, you know, Meg came from a poor family too. He didn't feel that he could give what she needed. That's also one of the reasons why he waited for her. I love that scene in Little Woman when Friedrich feels that he's not worthy of Joe, but it's also because he thinks that Joe is engaged to Laurie, and he can only base his views on Laurie to what Joe has told him, which is not a lot, and only that he's this rich neighbor and Joe's best friend. And that's pretty alarming when you're in love with this girl. And you hear that, okay, are they engaged? And he doesn't know that. And then he's so happy when he comes to Concord a year later, and then he finds out that Amy and Laurie are married. Joe is available.
Like, I always kind of, again, props to the 1970 version, as flawed as it is, they do handle that scene exactly as I kind of imagined it in the book, where, like, he's like, oh, yes, you're the friend. Hi, nice to meet you. And Laurie's like, oh, yeah, and this is my wife. And he's like, oh, you're married. Okay, well, we can be friends. Like, now there's nothing holding me back from, But the fact that he was willing to gracefully kind of step aside for Joe, if that was the case, is very endearing too. Like, it's only until after he realizes that Laurie is married to Amy and is not at all with Joe that he's like, oh, okay, now I can finally say my feelings. Which is very true with every version. Like, when he finds out that there is no Joe and Laurie, it's like, okay, now I can finally say what I feel. Otherwise, before, I was just willing to internalize it and just make me feel sad forever. Poor Friedrich. He was willing to do that for Joe if that was what she had wanted, but it ended up working well for everyone.
Such a nice scene when he's like, oh, and then the narrator mentions how Laurie thought he was the nicest German he ever met. He was so friendly. Right. It's a really funny scene. I really love the whole courting episode in the novel. He always wants what's best for Joe.
Again, it sort of makes me go like, oh, you two idiots, you love each other. Like how, they always seem to be just happening to meet up at the same spot. Like, oh, I didn't see you there. Maybe I'll go with you to see your sister, and maybe I'll come home for a spot of coffee. I mean, not that I was waiting to see you. Joe being all like, Friedrich, oh, I mean the professor is coffee this way. like it's very clear to everyone except to each other, it would seem that you are madly in love, but I guess love makes you share one brain cell in this case. But then it leads to probably one of the most romantic scenes ever, with them just taking shelter with each other under an umbrella and saying how much they just love each other. Just all comes out in this moment of, I believe you're going away, and that makes me sad. It's like, no, I'm not going away. I promise I won't leave you. I love you too much. Like, it's just, I love it. I love that scene so much.
It's a really romantic proposal.
I have nothing to give you but a full heart and empty hands, and the whole her taking his hand and saying, not empty now. It's like, this is true classic romanticism, when people talk about like Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Darcy holding Lizzie's hand, and people want to say Joe and Friedrich are not romantic. How dare you? You must not have read or watched that scene properly.
It's like when people say that Joe and Friedrich are not passionate enough. Then in the umbrella chapter, he's holding his voice crying, and then he asks her, why are you crying? And then she's like, because you're going away. And then we find out that he has been keeping Joe's poem with him for months and months. And they pretty much start to make out right after the proposal.
Right, and the fact that Joe, is the one who pretty much jumps on Friedrich, the fact that, despite the fact they're in the middle of a muddy road, is like, I just gotta kiss you because I can't hold it in, and just them making out while people are passing them and it's raining and their clothes are all muddy. Like, who cares? They gotta kiss here and now. Who cares who sees and whatnot? And particularly for back then, that was so scandalous.
Yeah, in the 19th century, it wasn't really seen as appropriate to have such public expression of
affection.
I read in another Louisa May Alcott novel, in the work Story of Experience, because there's the moment when David, who is once again based on Henry David Thoreau, when he confesses his feelings for Christine, who is the protagonist, he almost has the similar blurt that Friedrich has in the umbrella chapter, that he's been holding all these feelings inside and then he just lets it all out there when he confesses his love for her. And I think, it's something that Louisa kind of recycles in her stories. I think there's something similar in Rose in Bloom, when Mac confesses his feelings to Rose. When I read about Henry, he's quite similar to Friedrich in that sense, that he would take his time to think things through before he would express his opinion or something that he really wanted to say. There's a lot of descriptions about him that he was sort of more of a deep thinker, and then also in some ways very passionate person. Yeah, I think some of that must have come from Louisa's own experiences. Why else would she write about it in her novels? I've been talking about 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
Well, thank you, Christina, for joining me. This was a lot of fun.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me. I've never been a part of a podcast before, so this is very exciting for me. And I hope that the listeners get a chance to, enjoy it as much as I did.
You can find you at Tom Brühl from the Joe and Fredrik blog. It's a great blog. People go and read it.
Thanks. I try my best.
That was our chat for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening. Take care and make good choices. Bye.